And greetings and welcome to the QCast. This is season 4, episode 14, and QCast episode number 99. So maybe this panel today can help determine who should be guest number 100, but this is 99, exciting times on the QCast. And folks, today we have In the Room episode 2, a very exciting new QCast series where we have 3 former men's basketball national committee members who basically give us the inside scoop, just like we're in the room. And we've received great feedback on this new segment. We did one a few weeks ago before any games were played. And now that we actually have some game action, I figured it was time to circle back with my esteemed panel. And the panel is, in no particular order, Sara Quatrocky, the athletic director of Maryville College in Tennessee, Mr. Rick Ferry, who wears 2 hats on the campus of Albright, the head men's basketball coach and the co-athletic director, and Ryan Kane, the new AD at Carthage. Let me start first with Sara. Sara, how are you doing? I know that you were at some men's basketball games in St. Louis over the weekend. How did the Scots look in those 2 W's?
It was a great week for the Scots. I love traveling with teams. I try to get out and do a trip with each of our teams, and this was one I had circled on the calendar early on. I love going back to my home state of Missouri. I'm originally from Kansas City, but have family in Missouri too, or in St. Louis. So that was a fun trip. Took the boys up the arch. We went in those little capsules, crammed them all in. And we got all the way up there and they were just kind of like, this is it. Like, yeah, that's it, boys. That's it. Look out those little windows and grab a pick and, let's go get 2 W's, this weekend. So Scots look good, gained some confidence this weekend.
Who'd they beat, Sara?
Webster and Westminster.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you this, AD Sara. So what is a Gorlock?
Oh, I have no idea. I spent all weekend trying to figure out what that was.
Let me tell you, a Gorlock was named after the intersection of 2 major roads on campus. It is Gore and Lockwood. And I just wanted to see how deep you are in this division of the community. There's certain things that only the really deep get. And, that is what a Gorlock is. You'll never forget it now, correct?
Oh, I still will. I still will forget it. Still will forget it. I'll probably forget it as soon as we're off the Zoom. But that's great knowledge there.
Yeah.
Mr. Bob, thank you so much.
Because
I did wonder that. I asked myself that numerous times as I was walking around campus. I love walking around other people's campuses and I kept seeing it and I was like, what is that thing?
Now you know what a Gorlock is. The more you know, folks. Every show I'll open with a little trivia question for Sara. Let's move on to esteemed guest number 2, and that is Rick Ferry of Albright. So, Rick, we're 1-1 right now. First, let me talk about this Marymount game that you're leading by 3 when a kid throws in a 3-pointer with 8 seconds left to get it to OT. And then
that's how we're going to start. That's how we're going to start. We're just going to go right there right now.
We decided this show would be real talk. This is, remember, Hoops Real? This is Hoops Real. Yeah, well, this is not Hoops Fake. So then in OT, a kid hits a shot with 10 seconds left. First of all, Rick, your team played great at Marybot. Then you get this win over U Dallas, and U Dallas is 15 minutes from my house. They beat UT Dallas in the opener. And so you got to feel good about coming back with a win over a very good U Dallas team. How do you feel 1-1, Rick?
Well, so we're 2-1.
2-1. I cheated you.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. You know Gorlocks, but you don't know Albright's record. But we'll let that slide.
That's very true.
It was a good tournament, and I think our team learned a lot. We weren't sure. We're still not sure if we're going to be good yet or not, but that's certainly encouraging signs. Marymount was an NCAA tournament team, and that we had dead to rights. But then ultimately lost in overtime, and Dallas, as you said, had a good win. And it's so good to play teams from other regions, because you don't know the relative strength of the regions. It's so hard to gauge, when you're just looking at numbers and paper. So it was interesting to do that and play them. They have a couple really nice players. So that was a good bounce back win for us. Day two of tournaments, you never know what you're going to get. A lot of times it's a team that's going to play with more energy and just be able to bounce back, has a little more depth, all that. And I felt like we had each of those factors on that particular day.
So 2-1 for the Lions. Kudos for a good start for Rick's team. And our third member of the panel is Ryan Kane, the AD at Carthage. Big win for the Firebirds yesterday over Anderson. Anderson is a really good team that's got some good wins already on the season. Firebirds are 4-1, Ryan, and karma is a what, and the only loss for the Firebirds, I believe, is against a bunch of kids that you recruited. Am I saying this correct? So
yeah, absolutely,
against Ripon. So tell me about your thoughts on all this.
Yeah, no, first of all, yesterday, you're right. Interesting, Thanksgiving week. So we played the game at 4:30. I know the officials loved that early start time. They were home in time for dinner. It was an interesting day, having that time for a tip off, but it's like we always say, us D3 aficionados, that was a high level college basketball game. I mean, there were so many good players on that court. That was one of those environments where, like, you could take a high school player right now and put him in that gym and he would learn quickly, like, where do I fit? How do I get, how can I play on this court? There was just both teams, I think at one point, were combined over 50% from three, and that was deep in the second half. So, and it wasn't like you had one or two guys that were pitching them in. I mean, everybody was cooking yesterday. So that was a big high level game, but, I think, as basketball in the Midwest is very deep. There's lots of good players.
Yep.
They all can't go to WashU. They all can't go to Oshkosh. So there's plenty of good players around here. And so, there's a few of them still left over there at Ripon, and they did a nice job the other night. And I think that was another example of an environment that has an impact. I think the student section and the environment in that gym really played a factor. In fact, speaking to the coach at Ripon after the game, who came from lacrosse, where, big cavernous gymnasium on a big public school campus that really rarely ever got students to the games, was like, wow, this is pretty cool to coach in a game where the students can have an impact on it. So, I think that had a part in it for sure.
Carthage women's basketball under Megan Jones off to, did I see 3-1 start? That's a good start.
Very good. Yeah, they've beaten they've beaten the teams they're supposed to beat. Chicago was their kind of first real test, and I told the coach from Chicago after the game, I think they had 13 made threes after the third quarter, and I thought they were going to break their school record. And Chicago's been around as long as the crust of the earth is cooled, so I can imagine that they have quite the records there.
On Rick's campus, the women's basketball team at Albright is 2-2. They go to Marymount, and Sara, you guys have women's basketball. I think you're at Transylvania, or you play Transylvania on the 25th. Is that the next opponent?
Correct. And they've also played Christopher Newport. They've had a very challenging start to their season for Coach T's young squad, but they're hanging in there. They're learning. And, he's excited that his ladies are excited to compete. So, they'll take what they can out of the non-conference season and use that when they get into conference. So
really fun time of year that we're able to talk about, real games that have been played, and heading into Thanksgiving, and then what starts in December is just a blast. And so we're at that point. Let me ask you guys, just kind of informally, your takes on the first couple weeks of play. You guys have been at games. You may have followed some games from other places. Any just general impressions about the start of the Division III men's basketball, women's basketball season so far? Let me start with Rick. Any takeaways on your end, Rick?
Yeah, what's really impressed me is how many traditionally good programs are playing each other. And you can really see the message that we've been putting out there carrying through, because, like I'm not looking in advance to see who's playing who, but each morning or either night or morning, I get on, and look at all the scores, and it's like, oh my gosh, they played them and they played them and they played them. And it's, that's really been something to watch. And, so, I think it's, you can't get caught up just from the outside. You can't get caught up in records right now just because good teams are beating good teams.
Right.
And it's I'm sure it's some really good basketball to watch.
Yeah, like on the men's side, that Scholars Classic where they had NYU and WashU, Hopkins and Swarthmore. I mean, I don't think that happens without all the emphasis on, scheduling. And it's a brilliant tournament because every team, I think whether you win or lose, you come out of that winning that in some way related to the resume. And so you look at all these cool, I don't know, Carnegie Mellon played at Whitman and Whitworth. There's Mary Hardin Baylor was up at Illinois West, and we just keep going down the line of these cool games where you're like, wow, I can't believe they're playing. And so that, I think that is a function of what the committee has been messaging. Sara, how about on your end, takeaways from the first couple weeks of play?
Yeah, Rick hit it there. Like, everybody's playing each other. No one's scared to play outside a region. And they're going to play the best teams they can. Even right here on my own campus, week 1, my team got on a bus and drove all the way to Rochester, New York. That will hopefully pay dividends. They got to see really good teams. And I know that even my coach was, a little battle tested and came back, a little down from the trip, being such a long trip and coming back with 2 losses. But he played 2 really good teams that, were in the NCAA tournament last year, will probably be in the NCAA tournament this year, and came back and won 3 games this week because of what they learned from those games. So you're not going to learn anything, in those opening weeks playing teams that you're just going to go out and beat by 20, 25. And I think that's what we used to see. And so now we're coming out the gates with these top 25 matchups,
Right,
which is really cool to see at our level. And you just don't get that. If you look at Division II scheduling, they're not doing that. They're not doing that at all.
right.
You're not seeing those matchups. They're staying local. They're not traveling. And I just think it's really cool that our game has done this, and we've seen the evolution of this over the past, 2 to 3 years, really. And it's just really exciting for Division III basketball.
Maryville men played Rowan and Rochester. Correct, on opening
Yeah.
weekend. The
Yeah.
Rowan game, I was sitting on an airplane, like we had boarded and there's like 2 minutes left, and now we start to taxi back, and I'm supposed to have my phone off and I don't, and the flight attendant's looking at me like giving me the stink eye, and I'm trying to watch the end of this game, and it's like now it's a 1-point game.
Yeah. It was like an NCAA tournament game.
Yes.
Day 1, and it just felt like that day 1. And that's what all these games feel like in these first 2 weeks, which is really cool.
I couldn't get the final till we were like in the air, so we take off and I lose the signal. I wrote it out as long as I could, and then I had to wait to get to 10,000 feet to get the American Airlines Wi-Fi, and I tuned it in to see that Maryville loses a heartbreaker. So great games there. And then Ryan, you guys on the men's side, you're ranked 18th in the country. You've got number 2 Whitewater coming up next. So the Firebirds are in a fun season right now and have a big one coming up. Any takeaways, Ryan, from you on this first couple of weeks of play?
Yeah, I obviously, echo, Rick and Sara's sentiments. There's been some really tremendous games out there, but I think the thing that's been really interesting for me is in this world of transfer portal that we see at the other levels, I feel like Division III has been a little untouched by it. Like, what I'm seeing is some of these really, really special players on these teams are back again, right? Miles Barnestable's back at Whitewater. I saw Vinny D'Angelo hit a game winner again the other night. You got Trey Barber and John Hines at Christopher Newport. I could go on down the line. Kelvin, my guy, Coach Saul's off to a great start.
Yeah.
That's a team I saw play a couple of years ago at a tournament, and they were pretty young, and here they are. It's that group now. They're seniors, and it's just really nice to see some of that growth. These teams, these kids want to stick it out. be successful where they're at. So I'm excited to see how these veteran rosters play their seasons out.
It's a good point. All the and even some of like the fifth year guys are guys that have come back to their own place, like Philip Bulatovich at Carthage or Luke Yoder at IW. So you've got guys that are getting that year back from that like horrendous season. It seems like that was a lifetime ago that I was like waiting for someone to text me that the Titans were on a bus, like just that they boarded a bus, and then it'd be like, oh, the wheels are rolling. We're now driving. So I mean, I don't even want to think back to that season, but the kids got their year back, and many of them have been able to play that year. And so kudos to all of them. It's been on my end, I was at the Great Lakes Invitational. 2 teams jumped out. Calvin is as good as anybody in Division III. I mean, I don't know if I'm voting them 1 or 2 or 3, but somewhere in there, they're unbelievable. This Jalen Overway kid, who I think was 6'8" last year, is 6'10" this year. And I spent the weekend debating how high he could play. Foot speed wise, I think he could play in the Missouri Valley. I really believe that we kind of debated somewhere between there and like Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan, but I don't know. I saw Illinois State play, and I think he'd be their best post player. So they're good. And then Redlands, everyone knows the system that Eric Bridgeland has created, and he's done it at Puget Sound. He's gotten himself to an Elite 8 there. At Whitman, he got himself to a Final Four, was ranked number 1 a lot. And folks, it's coming at Redlands, and I think the train's coming into the station like right now, because he blew the doors off of Wisconsin Oshkosh, which is really hard to do. And he's got a couple good tests coming up non-conference wise, but look out for Redlands. So those were games that I watched. So guys, let's talk a little bit about in the room here. It's Thanksgiving week, and last time we visited, we said that you guys said that what the committee was doing at that time was really kind of doing a lot of like rack onboarding. Lots of new people on the committee, need to get them up to speed, need to train, need to onboard. Now we're 2.5 weeks into the season, so we're rolling. Sara, let me start with you. What Thanksgiving week men's basketball national committee? What is Coach Flakertsy and his committee and the racks? What's everyone doing right now?
Well, I've heard some rumblings. I think they're really doing the outreach right now, getting everybody involved, especially the new committee members. The new committee members are scheduling their weekly calls. Those need to be on the calendar, because once January, once you get back, you're ready to roll. Those need to be on the calendar for your rack. So just kind of getting organized. This is time to do that, because once January comes around, you're pretty much kind of in it. You're doing your orientations, you're doing your trainings, and then all of a sudden it's February and you're in your rankings. And so I think they're right now getting their meetings scheduled, getting their racks finalized, and the new members are getting acclimated to what's about to come, right? So hopefully they're watching these games. Hopefully they're getting to know who are the teams that are going to be the ones they're going to be having their eye on from week to week. Not that they're doing any rankings right now, but they should be, keeping their eye out for, Hampden Sydney's had some big wins, and, Guilford had a big win. I mean, these are things that I would be doing in my region, really keeping track of, these are the big wins that teams have had, because, those are going to be
Right.
what are the signature wins that teams have already been building on their resumes.
Let me ask Rick a question just about building out what Sara said about new members. Is there ever been a situation, without naming names, where you feel like one of your new rack members is not as engaged as they're supposed to be? And if so, how do you handle that situation? Just talk through like how you make sure everyone's locked in.
Well, at this point, you don't know. because everyone's just sort of on their own, and so
Right.
you hope that they're doing kind of what we've been doing. I mean, I think it just gets drilled into you. You're just out looking at results, and we have such familiarity with the programs that are up near the top that we're always looking, and and it's funny, like I'm looking at this stuff, and I'm looking at it with the eye of a committee member, knowing that I have no juice at all. So, but you can't help yourself because you've been trained that way. You don't start to pick up on things really until mid to late January, and you can tell who gets the landscape and who doesn't get the landscape, and we have regional buddies. So for example, one year me and Sara were regional buddies, and I had to kick her ass a few times, and get her in line.
Regional
And then
buddies. I like this.
she was good after that. No, I'm joking. I think she may have kicked mine. But
Well,
you have
yeah.
someone that that's kind of like it's like a check and balance that's in place, to make sure people are on point with the work they're doing leading into committee meetings.
Regional buddies.
Yeah.
It's very
We
wholesome.
did that. Yeah, we did that once we went to 10 regions, Bob, because it was a lot. Like knowing that we were going to go into those national committee calls with 10 regions, we were going to have to assess 10 regions. We teamed up, so the day prior to those calls, like at least I would check Rick's work, Rick would check mine. That way, if there was something I was kind of like unsure about, Rick would already have looked at it. If there was something Rick was unsure about, I would go through it. That way, when we brought it to the national committee, we would already say like, well, Rick already looked at this one and we made the switch from what the RAC thought, or, and vice versa. So that's how we teamed up. But hopefully they've already made those region buddies at this time. And how I would think they would make them is they would have a veteran committee member with a newbie, because that's how we always did it. So Rick and I were not region buddies last year because we were both veterans, and so we were unfortunately split up because Rick and I, we had a special relationship. That one year, man, we loved bickering. We had a lot of healthy debates, all the way till that final whistle of the championship, really.
Yep.
And
It was
Ryan,
special.
on your end, Ryan, just help people understand like the meeting cadences here. So have the RACs met yet? Does the national committee meet yet? Like what's going on in terms of meeting schedules at this point?
Yeah, so it's mostly like what Rick said. It's everybody's kind of on their own. You're keeping an eye on your region, taking a look at how teams are doing in your region, and then seeing what's kind of the big games that are coming up. I mean, we know what's going to happen when they get into conference play, and we know what that SOS does to some conferences, as far as it's going to increase it every time somebody plays somebody. Whitewater plays Platteville, or Benedictine plays iTech. That those types of things are going to certainly do things to your SOS once you get inside the league. But the meetings are going to be, there's going to be a large kind of orientation. So it's going to be the national committee as well as all of the RAC members about, here's what you need to do. Here's your logins. Here's where you store all the documents, things of that nature. And so from there, then, we're getting ready for that initial call. And, I think for the new RAC chairs, I think it's critical that they talk to somebody that's been through leading some of those calls. Because you may not have, to your point, Bob, you may not have the RAC member who's disinterested. You might just have that RAC member who knows only what maybe it used to be like, or what they think it's supposed to be like, or what they may have heard. And so you got to quickly make them understand, no, this is how we need to view this thing through this lens. Take away all the little biases and things that you may have brought with you to the table here, and set those aside and look at it through this lens.
We talked about watching games, right? So we talked about just want to do a quick around the room here with this group is were you guys all watching games from around the country as part of your national committee? I know because you're all busy at the time with AD duties or coaching duties, and so there's not a lot of free hours at all. But let me start with Rick on this one. Rick, were you able to watch some video streams around the country and watch some teams play during your time on the national committee?
Not a lot. Really not till end of season. Playoff time, conference playoffs. Because
Right.
you're so engrossed in your own when you're a coach. You're especially in the last month of the season, you're just struggling to keep your head above water. So, to be able to watch streams of other teams, it doesn't happen. So it kind of leads into us being so data driven and driven by the numbers. And that kind of goes back to Ryan's point. When you get new people involved, whether it's on the rack or the national, and they want to just go with eye test, well, I saw team A and I saw team B, and team A is definitely better than team B. So they got to be ranked ahead of them.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas the data may not support that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is that like I was reminded last night, I interviewed Coach Yuckham of WashU for the QCast, and just trying to get him for 30 minutes or 45 minutes. He's got all this prep stuff all day for his game Wednesday, then he's got practice, and then he's got to come home and, oh, by the way, do family stuff and eat dinner. And like, I don't know how there is many free hours in the day for watching a ton of games. Sara, on your end, I know that as the chair that you were watching a lot of games. Like, how often were you trying to get to some random stream game during your chair duties?
I would log in and catch like end of games a lot of the times. I love watching finishes, right? Good games, good finishes, seeing how teams finished. I was checking scores every night. If I wasn't watching a game, I was checking scores. I just felt like I needed to have all the information. I never wanted to be asked. I never wanted to not have information. I just felt like, especially as the chair, I needed to have all the information possible. And so last year, I really felt like I had a second job, during basketball season. And I took it serious. And I think that that's what a lot of people don't realize. And I think Luke's going to have a difficult time. I know the type of person Luke is, and he's going to want to do a really good job as chair. And it is going to be it's going to be difficult for him. He's a very good coach. He has a very good team. And he's an information guy. And
Right.
so he's going to want to have all the same information. And no pressure. We've had a string of really good men's basketball chairs, and I know he wants to do a good job as well, and in his final year on the committee, and have a good tournament at the very end. And I'm sure he's doing the same, watching finishes, watching scores every night, making notes. And just because I know the type of person he is, he's probably already got mock rankings after a couple of weeks here. I can't imagine that he's doing anything different than I was doing.
And Ryan, on your end, when you're leading your rack, are you encouraging those guys, those men and women, to be watching games? How much were you watching games, and trying to balance that with, at the time, coaching Ripon?
Yeah, I echo Rick's point. I was AD basketball coach, rack chair. And I think really the national committee, the rest of the rack chairs, really want you to be an expert in your region. So we're not asking for you to know what's going on at Region 1 or Region 2. Like, quite honestly, I'd rather not know. I'd rather be so well versed on everything inside my region.
Right.
That's the best way that I feel like we could serve the national committee. The same can be said for, the rack chair or the rack members itself, right? They're comprised of every conference in there. So just be the expert in your league. You don't need to know what's going on in the CCIW versus the ARC versus, You don't need to know that stuff. Just be really, really good at what's going on inside your league, and then understanding what the charge is at the national level and executing that.
It's a great lead in to our first edition of Mean Tweets. Here we go, guys. So Mean Tweets. And on Mean Tweets, I was able to just go to one Twitter person to find 3 mean tweets from last year. And then I've got some other people I can go to next, but without naming any Twitter handle names, mean tweet from last year, number 1 for these former committee members is, this is why the eye test matters in D3 hoops. People who played and coached at a high level have scouted and evaluated talent at a consequence level matter. Rochester never passed an eye test. So can we just get this out there once and for all? The committee members, as you guys just said, have full-time other jobs. The committee members watch as many games as they possibly can, but former chair Sara, what say you on the relevance of the eye test in the process?
Yeah, I mean, there is no eye test. I mean, as I can recall, in all of the training material that we give to everybody from the top down, it's literally like in there, like bolded. I mean, here, shout out to Mort, if you listen. It literally says, he puts it in on everything, like the eye test does not matter, right? Like, you know, you can watch a game today and your best player could, you know, have 35 points, but that's not going to matter come February when we're making a selection. And so, you know, the eye test is not a criteria. It's not one of the criteria. And I think that's what people that have never done this, you know, and that's, I always tell people, if you want to know the process, get on a rack, because the only way to know exactly how this is, how we do this year after year, is to get on a rack, because truly every decision that is made is evaluating criteria, and the eye test is not one of the criteria. It's
an important point for people to understand, because to use the eye test would mean that everyone would have to see every game.
Correct.
So if you're using the eye test, and I'm going back to, like, if you watched Illinois Wesleyan beat Oshkosh, but then you watched Illinois Wesleyan lose to WashU, you would have seen 2 different teams. So which eye test is correct? The Illinois Wesleyan team that played great or not so great? And so, like, the eye test is it's great to say that, but it is not part of this process, and it's a very data-driven process. These folks and their peers are watching games, but that is very clearly spelled out that the eye test is not a thing. Rick or Ryan, anything to add to the first response to mean tweet number 1?
Yeah, it's a slippery slope too. You know, it's you know, a little history lesson going back into like the 90s. You know, the committees were almost like old boys networks.
Yeah.
And everything wasn't as organized as it is now. And so you'd kind of surround yourself with like-minded people, and there's a little bit more control going on of who was getting into the tournament and how they were doing it, because it wasn't data driven, and it was more eye test driven. And it was very unhealthy. And now, you know, is it perfect? No, but you know, given where we are, and you know, it's you know, Division III athletics, you know, you don't have the national exposure to everything all the time. You know, this is a good system, and you know, and it's a fair system, and the people who do it are incredibly fair and do their best to be as accurate and thorough as possible.
Yeah, look at the Division I level. After they do the bracket every selection Sunday, there's 3 hours worth of pundits debating one team over the other. It's going to be the same at no matter what level you do that in, right? Is Ryan, anything on before we move to mean tweet number 2, anything on the eye test topic?
No, I mean, Rick said it. I mean, you know, this is the best way that we can do it to ensure equity across the board. And so Yeah, I mean, it's proven in the product too. You know, I mean, look at the tournaments, look at the games that we've had in the first weekends, the second weekends, the matchups that we've had. I mean, it's been really, really good. So
Mean tweet number 2 comes from the same Twitter handle. Real easy just to go to one person and find a bevy of mean tweets.
where's the equity in that? Come on,
Yeah,
Bob.
this is right. Yeah, we'll spread it. It was the most efficient way I knew to find mean stuff. So here we go. Mean tweet number 2. This goes to the timing of games. No team that goes 7-8 since January 1st should ever be in a national tournament. Momentum matters. So we're talking here about a team that had a worse record in the second half of the season versus the first half. Ryan, Kane, let's start with you. To what degree does the timing of the results matter in this process?
Wins are wins. They count in November, just like they count in. What would the opposite be true? What if you started out 500 and you finished blazing fast? Like, is that all that matters? Maybe that wouldn't get you in. You know, you got to win. You got to put those games on the schedule that matter. We've seen that. We talked about that already in this show. You win a few of those will go a long way. Still got to win games and win games that matter. And yeah, you know what? Momentum does matter when you're coaching a team, Rick, right? I mean, that does matter, but it does not matter when you're sitting in a room trying to figure out who's got the right resume to get in the tournament, and you're doing so equitably using data to drive those decisions.
And I would argue that it makes for a better season when a game that's played the first weekend is the same as a game played on the last weekend. It creates much more. I was sitting at the Shirk Center watching Illinois Wesleyan play Mary Hardin Baylor, and we had 2 possessions with the ball down 1. Didn't convert on either, lost the game. I mean, when that buzzer ended, I thought to myself, that is an enormous loss. Like that is a crushing loss in the resume. And I think that makes for a better setup than had that game been like, well, when games count more in February, we better win that one.
Well, this might be to maybe my own bias, but like, isn't that what makes college football so compelling?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, every Saturday is literally life or death for a lot of these teams. I love the college football product. And so I feel like that's the same thing we have right now in D3 basketball.
It's the same thing. Every game matters. Sara or Rick, anything more on the topic of when the games are played?
No, he killed that answer. It was great job there, Kaner. Good job.
All right, let's move on to mean tweet number 3. This gets to like how many teams from conferences can make the tournament. Maybe the process is flawed when it gives multiple conferences 5 teams each in the national tournament, and not one of them make it to the second weekends. Lots of false positives in the data. No shame in starting over. Couple things there to pick through is there any concern or any consideration to how many teams from a given conference are being discussed in the Pool C process? Let me ask Sara that question. Any talk of like, we've already put 2 in from the CCIW, we better not put 3 or 4 in? Like, talk about that, please.
No. Again, we sorry. I don't know why those 2 are laughing. We've already talked about, this is the most equitable way to choose the teams in the Division III tournament. We have our limits in how we choose the at-large teams. And if you saw how we did it in the room, and I think we'll be able to better explain that as these episodes go on, but after all of our AQs go in, we'll talk about, this will be a little teaser as we get through. We'll talk a little bit about our elevator system. That's how I like to describe it, the elevator system of how the teams on the board are. And we have 10 to choose from. We choose the best resume of those teams that are on the board. And so, again, when we just talked about in the last mean tweet, you know, games matter now, games matter in December, games matter in January and February. And so when you're racking up big wins on your resume, it doesn't matter what conference you're in. And if you're putting together a resume that deserves to be in the tournament as an at-large team, then you'll be chosen via the criteria that matters.
And part two of that question, let me ask Rick this. Part two is about like how like that these teams got in, but they didn't advance to the next weekend. And so how much are you looking at like the last year and analyzing whether, say, the WIAC teams that made the tournament, like what their success rate was and getting into, like, tell me how much the rule book or the criteria, the manual talks about looking backwards at conference results.
Well, section Q of the manual tells us that we're supposed to, zero, none, nothing. We that doesn't factor in even not one iota, because it's last year. We're not looking at your results from last February or January and factoring that in this year. Why would we look at your tournament results? I mean, I would say, we're calling this mean tweets, but I think it's just tweets that come from a position of just not understanding the process, and
that name wouldn't be as cool though. That name has no ring to it. I'm kind of a marketing guy,
Understood.
Tweets from people that don't understand the process. I'm going to try that next time, Rick. I like it.
Yeah, I think it's got a certain ring to it, doesn't it? That's doesn't factor in one bit.
So, folks, it doesn't factor in. There's a process. They put the teams in via the process. However the teams do is up to them. Now, random Twitter people like me, like I can fire a Twitter note to my guy Hilltopper and say the UAA has not been to the second weekend and the CCIW has. That is for random Twitter people to have fun with. That is not part of the criteria in selecting these teams, and that's very important. So, guys, I appreciate all of this, and I want to get you out of here. But first, it's Thanksgiving week special. I do want to go around the room and ask this panel for your favorite Thanksgiving memory. Like something as a kid, was there a tradition? Was there something you did? Is there something you still think of when it comes to Thanksgiving? Let's start with Ryan Kane. Ryan, give everyone a little good feelings here about some Thanksgiving thoughts.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, as a young lad, born and raised in Titletown, USA, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Thanksgiving always circled around football. And our Packers would often play the Lions. So I can remember a Walter Stanley punt return to beat the Lions in the late 80s, I want to say. I remember a 2007 game when Favre was kind of resurgent, 11 years removed from his MVP in the Super Bowl, and had like 300 and some odd yards, and we were like 10-1. I won't talk about how that year ended in a very frigid Lambeau to a what I thought was a bad Eli Manning led Giants team that went on. But yeah, and we won't talk about the 94 Jason Garrett game that lives on in infamy in Dallas, as you probably know, Bob.
I do.
So yeah, for me, it's always been about football.
Packers football. Rick Ferry, how about you? Thanksgiving. We're at Thanksgiving week. What's a Thanksgiving memory for the QCast listeners here?
We always all my buddies and I, we would always get together on Thanksgiving morning and play in the Turkey Bowl. And
was the Turkey Bowl tackle football or touch football, or what were we doing?
Well, it evolved.
Yeah, started
so
initially.
Tackle, didn't it? Initially it was it was tackle, and by the end it was I waved my hand somewhere near you, and so you're down, and just don't get hurt. And this is over the course of 20 years. But it's a great memory, and my buddies and I, we still talk about it, and there's Turkey Bowl lore, and the guys who supposedly could play injured or injured from the night before, or whatever it may be. It was just a great time, and it evolved from we'd play football for 2.5 hours and then sit around for a half hour talking about it, till we'd play football for half an hour and then sit around for 2 hours talking about it.
Sounds pretty awesome. I played in a
Yep.
similar little thing, and based on the way my body feels now at age 52, I can't believe I played like tackle football games with a bunch of dudes. So
Right.
that's great stuff, Rick.
Yep.
And Sarah, how about you? Give us a Thanksgiving memory.
Well, normally Thanksgiving week was always the first week that I could watch the Jayhawks with my dad.
Oh
So
boy.
because I would always go home for Thanksgiving, and it was the first time we could watch the games together. So that was always special. Hopefully it was always a year when they were like in the Maui Invitational, so there was multiple games. So this is one of those years. So hopefully we'll have a little rock chalk jayhawking this year to do. So but yeah, we were always college basketball family during Thanksgiving week, since the Chiefs don't play on Thanksgiving.
Three sports related memories.
Yeah.
No mystery why these folks ended up in sports related careers, folks.
Yeah.
And for me, I'll just give a non-sport shout out to the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, which was always a staple. I'm telling you, the scene where Snoopy and Woodstock are setting up their own personal party is one of the greatest scenes in television history. I encourage everyone to watch. I hope kids still watch this. Like, I assume they do. It's like the greatest thing ever. So, folks, Charlie Brown Thanksgiving is a QCast 5-star recommendation. Sarah, Rick, and Ryan, this has been a lot of fun. And the next time we do this, we'll probably start getting into some real stuff and probably even have enough data to do a little like let's rank a region or something. We have the D3 Datacast updated data all the time, where they've got winning percentage, SOS, projected RROs. So maybe we can even mock up some regions when we get next into this. Guys, this has been awesome. I know I'm stealing a ton of your time, and you guys are all very busy. Thank you so much for joining me on QCast Season 4, Episode 14. You guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Happy Thanksgiving to you all.